So let's see, scrolling to the top. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, July 20th electronic meeting of the Ann Arbor Transportation Commission. This meeting is being held electronically to protect public health and safety. We'll conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. Public comment will be via telephone or Zoom. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 206-337-9723 and enter meeting ID 960-2232-8200 or join via the Zoom link. This information is also available on the published agenda and in the public notices section of the city website and in a few other places as well. Okay, so next we're going to have Raymond call the roll. Oh, wait, no, first I'm going to welcome our newest commissioner, Pete Hauk, who was confirmed to, did I get that right? Yes. To serve on the Transportation Commission at Monday night's City Council meeting. Welcome. I don't know if you want to say anything about yourself. You don't have to. We can just dive.
Sure. I guess I wouldn't mind a brief introduction. Thank you. So I'm Peter Hauk. I've lived in Ann Arbor almost continuously since 1993. I've been an enthusiastic bike rider since I was about 5 years old. I got more actively involved with non-motorized transportation when I asked the city to install a sidewalk on Scioto Church near my house. So I ended up working with WBWC on that and eventually got involved with them and served on their board for a little while, for 4 years. So I met a lot of good people there and got more involved with non-motorized transportation advocacy. One other thing I'll say about myself is that during the day I work for Ford as a manufacturing engineer, and I've always had an interest in cars, but decided a long time ago that I really don't want to have to drive one every single day. Most times I would really prefer to ride my bike if I can. So I'm thankful for the chance to serve on this committee and looking forward to working with everyone on it.
Great. Welcome. And now I will ask Raymond to call the roll.
Very good. Commissioner Boland. Councilmember Briggs.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. And yes, thank you, Councilmember Briggs. As a reminder, please state from where you are calling from when you say here. Commissioner Brovin.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hadamaki.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hauk.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Keeler.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Kleinman.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Lee.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Smith.
Here from Webster Township.
Commissioner Wanenkoff.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hess, absent. No, here from Ann Arbor. Commissioner Hutchinson.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Margolis had sent her regrets that she wasn't able to make it. Lieutenant Mike Sherba. And Commissioner Stupka. All right, we do have quorum because we have more than 6 voting members present.
Great, thank you. Next, we're going to do approval of the consent agenda. There are 2 items on the consent agenda, approval of the agenda and approval of the minutes. The minutes got posted later than usual due to staffing issues this month. So if there's anyone who would like more time to review them, we can postpone approval of the minutes to next month. So if anyone would like that extra time, feel free to raise your hand and we can just amend the agenda. All right, I'm not seeing any hands. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? Megan, and seconded by Brett. All those in favor of the motion, please physically raise your hands. All those opposed, and the motion passes. Consent agenda is approved. Next up is public comment. This is an opportunity for people to speak for up to 3 minutes. Please call 206-337-9723 and enter meeting ID number 2232-8200 or connect via Zoom as described on the agenda. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number or your Zoom ID. In order to raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, press *9 on your phone or select the raise hand button in Zoom. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. Do we have any public comments today?
Yes, we do. And before we jump into that, I just wanted to quickly apologize for last month. There was a typo on the agenda where the Zoom login ID number, or like the passcode, was missing a digit. It was a cut and paste. So I do extend heartfelt apologies. It was just a scrivener's error. But I have double checked and triple checked everything. And I think the agenda and all the postings are correct today. So, and we do have some folks online to comment. So that's good. The first hand I see is from Clark Chernesky. Clark, I have gone ahead and allowed you to talk. Feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself, and then the floor is yours.
Okay, there we go. Good evening, everyone. I'm calling in about the capital improvement project or plan update. And there are 3 things that I want to endorse wholly. They all have to do with railroad things. First is the Ann Arbor Intermodal Station, and who knows when this will get done. We've had some real problems with the Federal Rail Administration on this, despite the need. And the need for it keeps growing. Development around the present station makes expansion pretty much impossible and probably precludes the building of a parking structure on the present site. The second and third have to do with underpasses underneath the railroad. The one that's furthest along is the Barton Underpass on the west side of town. And this is something that's on the border-to-border trail. It's a key link in that plan, and endorse that wholeheartedly, and that's moving along. And I expect construction will probably start in a year or 2. The third item is another underpass, and that is to link the Gallup Park pathway, bike pedestrian path, with the Nichols Arboretum. Many years ago, there was a death by somebody walking along the tracks, and recently there were 2 people severely injured. Despite putting up fencing, at least on one side of the tracks, people continue to try to get in there. And the reason is because there's a real need for it. And if there's a big need, it's kind of hard to just fence something off. People will try to find some way around it, sometimes tragically. And I know that there was a study done, I believe it was in 2002, a report on the 2 underpasses. And this should be looked at again. It's not a simple issue because it involves the Arboretum, which is primarily owned by the university, but remind you that I think about 25% of it is owned by the city. So the city should have some input into this. At that time, the new director for the Arboretum was wholly in favor of this. And it's something that I think should be moved along into an engineering phase. So
30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Do we have any more?
We do have 2 other participants on the line, but I don't see their hand up. So if any other members from the public wish to speak up to the commission, if you could use the raise hand function, and that way I can unmute you. All right, Molly, I think we're good.
Okay. And as we have done in the past, if someone missed the window and wants to speak, we can sort of find another opportunity in the agenda to make room to get another comment in. But in the meantime, we're going to move on to the rest of the agenda. First up, we have a presentation on the DDA's curb management study with Jada Halbrock.
Thank you. My name is Jada Halbrock, and I am the manager of parking services at the DDA. And I appreciate you providing us this opportunity to speak with you. I know you've been seeing updates on this project for quite some time, so we're glad to have the opportunity to speak with you about it tonight. I'm just going to provide a real brief introduction and then turn it over to the team members from our consultant team at Walker Consultants. So as far back as 2018 and 2019, DDA staff realized that not only were curb use downtown changing, but we were just seeing a tremendous increase in demand. So we saw that many other communities were beginning the work of addressing the changing needs and preparing themselves to be ready for whatever came in the future. And for our downtown, we envisioned a study that would build on the work of the downtown street design manual that would allow us to manage the curb in a more equitable and informed way. We saw a study with an emphasis on using goals to guide programming and management of the curb, particularly as it related to commercial delivery and loading, TNC pickup drop-off, and parking for cars, bikes, and motorcycles. COVID and the related revenue impacts to the parking system meant that we needed to hold off on the study a bit, but we're pleased to be underway with it now. Generally, when DDA staff is here presenting to you, you're learning about one of our TIF projects that my colleague Amber Miller leads. We think about the DDA as two systems, the TIF system and the parking system, both working in support of the DDA mission. Next slide, Jim. The DDA manages downtown parking based on a parking agreement between the city and the DDA. This management includes the off-street structures and parking lots, as well as the curb space and metered parking within the parking area. Parking enforcement is managed by the city. And the next slide is a map. I don't expect you to be able to see the details on this map, but I just kind of wanted to illustrate the difference between the DDA boundary, which is that dashed line, and the larger parking area boundary that was established as part of the parking agreement. And that greater parking area is what we're talking about. Next slide. So the DDA manages our parking system in support of a vibrant downtown. And we look to the DDA goals and principles that are included in our renewal plan. And we also look to city goals and work to be in alignment with those when we can. Next slide. The fiscal year 23 budget anticipates parking revenues just under 18 million. And I've included on this slide a few examples of things that we spend those funds on. So there are required elements like paying for operations, debt payments, and the 20% payment to the city. And we also invest in the longevity of these important city assets through a robust maintenance and restoration program, particularly for the parking structures. Additionally, we use parking revenue to support the Get Downtown program and special events in our downtown, and to fund the Go Pass for downtown employees. So that's my introduction, and now I'd like to turn it over to Jim to introduce himself and his colleagues on the call from Walker.
Thank you very much, Jada. So good evening, everyone. Jim Corbett with Walker Consultants. I have two colleagues on the call with me here today, Chrissy Mancini-Nichols and Christian will be joining us today, Christian Turner. And so we're just going to kind of give you a kind of a high-level walkthrough of our engagement with the Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority. As you see a couple of brands and logos across the top of this deck here, we have three subs that are working with us on this contract. Two of them are local agencies, the Greenway Collaborative Inc. and Beckett Rader. And we also have IBI Group, which is a firm that has US-based operations, but they also have a Canadian focus as well. And so this is really what our org chart looks like with our group. I am the project manager for the firm there. We, as I think I may have mentioned in some prior communication, that we do have a local office in Ann Arbor. So Rick Klein is actually the principal in charge of that office. And then, of course, I mentioned we've got the Indianapolis office, the San Francisco office, and several other offices beneath me on the chart here, of which Chrissy and Christian are a part of. And then you'll see the 3 subs listed below us there at the very bottom. So the point we're trying to make here is we've got, some very good national experience involved in this, in curb management theory and curb management practice. While it is a very new kind of pursuit or concept these days, we've been able to make a lot of progress with a lot of different communities around the country in that sense. So I think the biggest thing here is that the subs that are working for us, we all do share some shared values in that sense. And we kind of complement each other where one firm may not have what the other has and the other brings the rest of the table. So let me just turn it over to Chrissy at this point, and I'll let her kind of walk us through the rest of the slides here.
Thanks, Jim. And Jim, it's probably being modest to say you lived in Ann Arbor for many years, so you know the city very well. So we have a lot of local expertise there. So hi, everyone. I'm Chrissy Mancini-Nichols. I'm Walker's Director of Curb Management, and wanted to talk to you about the study and first give you some background on our work. So for the past about 3.5 years, we've been conducting a curb management research and development study. We started the study because, historically we've done a lot of parking studies and, only looked at the curb in terms of parking. And that's because a lot of what we heard from municipalities and cities and other entities was, we want to know what our parking is like. But even before the pandemic, we started to see this big switch to needing more TNC loading for Uber and Lyft, commercial delivery, bike share, scooter share, all these other elements that needed access to the curb. So we know that the curb is no longer just about parking, especially in Ann Arbor, where you have slow streets, people-friendly streets, all these activities where you're thinking about activating your streets and your curbs. So we started this research and development study, one, to collect data because we have a lot of parking data, but we wanted to collect a lot of data on, for example, commercial delivery. What types of deliveries are occurring? How long do they take? What are the new peak times? As trends increase for e-commerce, how does that changing the need for commercial delivery? And how does commercial delivery, is it different between strictly commercial and retail uses versus residential uses, especially where in Arbor you have a lot of different mix of uses in your retail areas? We wanted to collect all this data, and the trends that we're seeing in our data are really enlightening. Our first data collection effort was with camera, and we're collecting data with cameras because we need to collect, like 7 days a week, many hours throughout the day. Our first data collection effort in Sarasota, over 3 weeks, we collected over 13 million data points because we were collecting activity across the day. There was so much activity going on. We're collecting activity every 10 seconds, so we get all the quick pickup and drop off. So it's really changed the way we think about studies and how we study our streets and curbs. We're also piloting and testing lots of new technology because there is all this technology out there. It seems like there's a new curb management technology vendor on the scene every day. So we're purchasing some of that technology, actually using it in the field, seeing the accuracy, testing it out. So that ultimately we've conducted a lot of pilots for commercial delivery, pickup and drop off, parklets, all different types of pilots, so that we have lots of these learnings now to bring to the study with Ann Arbor and the DDA. So that's a little background on our work. And next slide, Jeff, you can keep going. So in the project plan, there's just been a lot of work that's already been done, especially around the DDA's initiative around people-friendly streets, the street design manual. We're building on all of that work. We are engaging some internal and external stakeholders, specifically around the need for pilots and figuring out how those will work and monitoring them and evaluating those pilots. We've already collected data, and we'll get into that. And we're doing a lot of data collection, background analysis, a digital curb inventory. So going out and actually capturing all the regulations at the curb and putting that into a digital platform. We're then conducting a pricing analysis, as I said, pilots, and then the final plan, it will be more of a toolkit for how the curb management program will be organized and work and to be implemented. Next slide. So I mentioned we're having stakeholder committee meetings. We have our internal core team with the DDA that we are meeting with regularly and advising us on all aspects of the study. Also working, presenting and working through the DDA board. We've met with the downtown street design team to vet talk through some of these initial project plans. We are, now that we have our data, we're analyzing the data and determining where we should have pilots. So once these pilots are, we're working through, and once we have a better sense of what types of pilots we need, we're going to engage more around merchant associations, pilot advisory groups to figure out exactly how to implement that and how to, what exactly we need from everyone to ensure the pilots are successful. Next slide. As I mentioned, we're digitizing the curb. So, we're actually going out, collecting all the regulations at the curb. And you see here an example of what that will look like. So it'll actually be a platform that shows every curb segment, what the regulation is right now. And then that will be an ongoing way for you to update regularly. And, now you can update that platform in a digital way. Long term, there's a data standard that is currently being worked on that, this digital curve inventory will live with this data standard. So, long term, you'll be able to use this platform to talk to curb operators, tell them about things like as regulations changed, you can talk to FedEx, and FedEx will know when a new commercial delivery zone is implemented. That's the idea, and that's why we want to move to digital curb inventory platform. But so that's what we're setting up now to be prepared for the future. Next slide. And then I also should mention we're collecting curb activity. So we're collecting curb activity along Liberty, in Carytown, and on South U. Right now, we've just finished up a data collection. We did 14 block faces. We'll have another round in September on South U. So we just got all of that data and are starting that analysis right now. We also have done all of our background information on all the existing conditions, major destinations, origins and destinations, policy analysis, and looked at all the different plans and policies that will inform the study as we develop recommendations. Next slide. And then from there, once we have all of this input, we'll figure out what's a realistic fee structure for all curb uses. Should we change rates? Do we price commercial loading zones? What does that look like? How do state and local regulations affect any pricing strategy for users other than parking? So we'll conduct that analysis and then figure out, long-term, are there structures, agreements you need to make with, for example, Uber and Lyft or commercial delivery companies, and set out a plan for long-term implementation. Next slide. And as I said, we're conducting at least 2 pilots. So we're, based on the information that we're gathering now from our data analysis of the curb activity, we're going to decide, what's a good location for pilots, what type of pilot should those be. So for example, if we have a commercial loading zone pilot, that data is going to inform where that pilot should take place, at what times. And from there, we'll talk with different commercial delivery operators to, educate them, help inform the pilot. Same thing if we had a passenger pickup and drop-off loading zone. We'll use that data to determine where that should be, talk with different transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft. The loading zone might also be used by private cars that are just dropping or picking up family or friends. So we'll think about what does the signage look like? What do we need to paint the curbs? Things like that. So we are now figuring out what those pilots should be. So we'll have more information on that very soon. And as I said, the end result will be a curb toolkit. This will be, it's an educational document that outlines the process is for how do we operationalize the curb. So for example, if you're a business and you want to have a commercial loading zone, what is the actual process for the business to take to get that commercial loading zone? And then for the DDA or the city or whoever the entity is that has, the authority to grant that loading zone, what are all the steps they take? So it'll be a toolkit that is focused on operationalizing the curb. We'll have all of our background information and, you can see all the findings from the study, but our goal is to deliver something that's really tangible. That's more of a toolkit to help with future planning. Next slide. And yeah, and then we'll of course have the plan that walks through all of our study, like I said. So with that, that's a little bit about the project. We'd love to take questions, and if you have comments or any input that you may have on the study, we'd love to hear it.
Great. I'll ask people to use the raise hand function. I think it's easier to stack questions that way. Yeah, Erica.
Thanks. Thank you so much for the presentation. It's exciting to hear this is happening. We've been talking about it for a long time, so great to see it. So I just wanted to make sure, it sounds like there's lots of data collection that's happening. And I know you mentioned Liberty and Carytown and South University, but are those the only areas that are being done, or are there other streets? How many streets, I guess, across the downtown are being?
Yeah, so we have some existing data, like parking data for all of the DDA area. For the data collection for the activity, we targeted specific areas because we want to collect in areas where there's a lot of activity. And it's very different than collecting parking data because we're installing cameras. We have to look at like 20 hours of data a day, every day. So it's much more expensive. So we really wanted to target in where we're collecting. So it ends up, I think it will be, I believe 16 blocks. But when we looked at the overall area of the DDA, I believe Jada, said it was like 20 or 25% of all the blocks. So we have a pretty good representation. And, we picked some areas that we thought were a little different from each other in terms of like their retail and activity. So we could apply those to other blocks where we aren't collecting data.
Okay. And are there also, are MDOT roadways also, is data being collected along those as well? Like Huron?
No, we're primarily focused right now on locations where there is like currently metered parking.
Okay.
And on some of the streets that we have not been able to tackle, like State Street, because it's under construction, we're able to use some of the information that was collected in other projects and efforts and kind of pull some of that in.
Okay. And I can understand the desire to focus on metered parking, and I'm sure, there's a limited, you have to identify the scope somewhere, but I can imagine, even though we don't have that much control over MDOT, it would be nice to be able to know how some of those areas, especially around developments, are being used so that we could be advocating in a more informed way for solutions. And then I know that we hear a lot about use and misuse of our protected bikeways. And I think we have a sense of what that looks like, but it would be interesting to capture a little bit more data on that to think about what solutions might improve them as well.
Good point. Thank you.
Pete.
I was also going to say that I am interested in hoping that this study would answer what can we do to keep delivery vehicles out of the bike lanes. I mean, that's what I'm going to be reading this study and hoping to see an answer for.
It's a challenge in every city right now. We're working on this issue in many cities because it is such a challenge. And when you've built such nice infrastructure, you want bikers to use it.
Brian. You're muted. Sorry.
Wouldn't be a Zoom meeting without at least one person forgetting that. Are there any areas that you were able to focus on that would have been near intersections to allow for a queue jump lane for transit, or along BRT identified corridors consistent with the city's A20 sustainability plan and our soon to be approved long range plan?
So we will consider as part of the analysis and recommendations, we'll be considering that and working through those issues and like talking through if you want a queue jump or, transit connections, how that works, or like how the curb should be allocated based on the data. And I should also mention, as part of the study, we're conducting an equity analysis. So what are the origin and destinations, equity in terms of demographics and income, and equity in terms of mode share at the curb. So one, how is the curb prioritized? Based on goals. So if your goals are to, reduce VMTs and increase biking and walking, and the curb is programmed just for parking, that's not in line with the overall goals. And I think getting through slow streets and all those other people-friendly streets, those initiatives are obviously working to advance those goals. So we're looking at mode share at the curb, but we're also looking at equity from origin destination. So we know where the curb hotspots will be, but do people have access to those hotspots by means of other than driving and having to pay to park, lower cost options like biking and transit. So that's where we'll be performing, what are good locations for things like bus lanes or queue jumps or, whatever the mode is, so that you can have more equitable access.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
I have a couple of questions since I don't see other hands. And thank you for this presentation. I've been eagerly awaiting this study for a long time. So one thing that you didn't really go into very much was specifically around parking for people with disabilities. I think I speak only for myself here, but in general, I'm not a fan of using curb space for private vehicle storage, but I do think that one exception is making sure that there is access for people with disabilities. And I'm curious about, I guess, how you're collecting that data. Is there a way to be like looking at how many disabled spots we have right now, how much use they're getting, so that we can make sure in the mix that we're including the needs of people with disabilities and their access to downtown?
Yeah, and I think so. We're collecting an inventory of what's there now, and we'll see within our data analysis, if how ADA parking is used. But I think going forward, that's fine. That's existing conditions. But going forward, like you're saying, what is the best use of the curb? And is it short-term spaces? Is it commercial delivery? And then is it providing more access, more ADA access, and moving long-term or like longer-term parkers off the curb? So that's definitely something that we'll recommend, like what is the right amount of ADA spaces per block, especially with, aging population nationwide. These are trends that every city is facing. So what does that look like? So we'll definitely have recommendations around, DDAs.
And are you going to be meeting with the Disability Commission or the Commission on Disability as one of the groups that you meet with in this process?
Yeah, I believe so.
Great.
Yes.
Should I have another question? Oh yeah. So actually you ended up answering this. I was curious about how you're going to deal with the sort of high frequency curb users like the rideshare and the delivery services. We know that UPS instructs their drivers to park in bike lanes, for example. And so I don't know how the city's going to handle that, but it's going to be important, I think.
Yeah, and there's just a lot of different factors that go into drivers are trying to do their job, and we want them to have access and be safe and all those things and have access to the front door, but we want to make sure that everyone else has access and it's orderly. So that's our goal, and that's where we'll perform outreach to different companies to think about what are the carrots and sticks to get there, and what's gonna incentivize more, carrots or sticks.
Got it. Thank you. I see Erica and then Raymond.
Thanks. In terms of the toolkit that's going to be provided at the end, I know one thing that the Planning Commission has wrestled with in the past is use of the curb or around new developments, and there's always a lot of discussion about that, but not necessarily a whole lot of solutions. I'm hoping that also in the data collection here that there's intentional collection around some of our newer developments and I guess just higher density residential developments in the downtown area, and some recommendations there, obviously towards the DDA, but also, if there are other recommendations that would be related, that should be directed towards the planning department. I think that would be helpful to know as well.
Yeah, and we're seeing, so for example, if you look at the city of Seattle, they were one of the first cities to think about prioritization several years ago, and they would prioritize for mobility. But when they had new developments, no matter if that street was prioritized for a bike lane, people were dropping off, short-term to bring their groceries in or to get in a TNC or whatever it was. So that's where you run into. So now it's like you have to move the bike lane. So yeah, that will definitely be part of our study, because that's the reality of any new development at this point. And can you do that can you have a loading dock or something else that's not on the street?
Raymond.
Actually, I was raising my hand for Larry's benefit, because I can see that his hand raised on my end, but it doesn't look like it's showing up on your end, Molly.
Yeah, my phone isn't one of them ones with a screen.
I
show up as the ghost. But my question is: are you in this study? Are you keeping curb cuts and bus pads, bus stops and crosswalks in mind as well? The usage of those.
Yeah, so the curb cuts, that will all be in the inventory, the digital inventory. So we'll have all of that information. And yeah, bus stops, that's all going to be in the digital inventory. So we'll have, a detailed information on all of that.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I'm not seeing any other hands. So thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. I know we're going to look forward eagerly to see the results of all of this. And if other questions come up for the commission, we can find a way to bring you back.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Great. All right. Thank you. So
Thank you all.
Next up, we have the capital improvement plan update. Oh, is Kayla here tonight?
No, she's not. Sorry to disappoint. But yeah, so Kayla had given the presentation on the capital improvement plan and program last month, just kind of the overview, gave a lot of the background information. And we're at a point where if the Transportation Commission wishes to make a recommendation on the upcoming capital improvement plan, now would be a good time to do so. As a reminder, and for our new commission members, the city develops a new capital improvement program every 2 years, and then in the intervening years, there's just kind of an update, a minor update. But we're headed into a major plan development, a new 2-year cycle. So this really affords the opportunity to look holistically at the project list, look at the prioritization of the projects, look at the scopes of those projects. And if there's anything that the commission wishes to weigh in on, that process is going to start ramping up probably in about September. So if the commission wishes to make a formal recommendation, we can draft something for the next meeting. You can vote on it formally, and then that can go into the record as part of the CIP development process. One of the things I can do, if you'll give me just a second, I can share my screen, which will show what the recommendations were in the last cycle. So let me pull that up here. All right. All right. Did the screen come up that says CIP recommendations? Yes. I'm seeing some head nods. Thank you.
Can you embiggen it a bit?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
All right. So, this, wasn't this reflected what the Transportation Commission were listed as priorities last time. So modifying scope of CIPs to accelerate construction of bike infrastructure downtown, people-friendly streets part 2, and the bicycle network gap project. Then to modify the scope of the streetlights project, especially for Packard, that this is a top priority because of the mid-block crosswalks in the vicinity. And then implement as soon as fiscally feasible the recommendations from the South Street Corridor Plan, including traffic reconfiguration and streetscape improvements, buffered bike lanes and other bicycle safety improvements, major gateways and improved wayfinding, and aesthetic improvements along the corridor. And then the last one was implement projects from the Healthy Streets program in a permanent capacity, the downtown core, weekend closures, weekly closures, seasonals, and the neighborhood slow streets. And then there was also a reference back to some past recommendations as well. And I have that up. This is the one from August, which was focused on the Elmwood Drive Bike Boulevard, that it should include that project. And low stress bike connectivity on Platt and Packard, include pavement markings and signage. So these are some of the historic recommendations that have been made by the Transportation Commission. As you can see, you can reference these. You can come up with new recommendations, pretty much whatever you think is most appropriate. There, in terms of how you would want to go about doing this, there are a couple different ways. You could go off and do it independently. You can see if, a volunteer or two want to kind of quickly look through the CIP and see if there's anything that jumps out. Or, we can just have a group discussion similar to this. So, Molly, I'll turn it back over to you in terms of, what the commission's preference is in terms of if they want to do anything and what mechanism you might want to pursue.
Great, thank you. I think we definitely want to do something. The what and the how are open questions. If folks have thoughts, we can talk about it now. Erica?
Somebody else is jumping in. It seems like it's challenging to just kind of generate a conversation around the CIP. It might be a little bit more productive to have a small subcommittee of folks that would be able to review the projects and make some recommendations on what seems to be the highest priority there. And I know there's a lot of different elements that go into prioritizing, what gets the top ranking. in the CIP, but looking out a little bit as well into the further horizon to see, stuff that is maybe always at the horizon, but never makes it to the upcoming budgets.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I will say maybe we can take a few minutes now if there are things that are particularly top of mind that we can just throw out there now, and then that might help make whoever volunteers to do this separately make their job a little bit easier. So, like, for example, a couple of things that come to mind for me are quick build projects. So I know that we were able to get some funding, I think it was ARPA money, to put towards some quick builds this year, but I think we need to think about sort of like ongoing budgeting for getting more of these in place and having a process. So quick builds feels like something we've talked about a lot. And then the other big one is a little cute little plow for the protected bike lanes, so that we can start actually protecting bike lanes, and especially start protecting bike lanes outside of downtown. Those are the things that I know I see come up a lot, that I know we've been talking about for years, that I just I'm going to toss out there to get us going. Pete, go ahead.
I could also use some help understanding or having a little more granularity in what counts as a critical sidewalk gap, for example, or a critical portion of the bike network that needs to be filled in. And we have a list of what's critical in the non-motorized plan, but there's too many critical ones to put into the CIP all in 1 year. So what are the critical of the critical, or how are we ranking them? I guess I could use some help understanding that, if there are other resources. And if we don't have that granularity, I guess I'd like to know how we could get to it or generate it.
Yeah, and just to quickly address that, I think on the sidewalk side, we definitely have a pretty thoughtful process in terms of how we identify and prioritize those gaps. Nick can speak to it. We can share that information, and we can share it with the whole commission, because it's probably been a while. But it takes into consideration proximity to schools, proximity to transit, proximity to, I think, density, and it's largely a GIS exercise where it goes through and just kind of evaluate sidewalks based on those parameters. We don't have an established protocol or process per se for bike lanes in the same regards. Many of the bike lanes that we've been doing are really, you've heard me say this, opportunistic in the past, where, there's another street project that's happening, and then we look for an opportunity to fill gaps and install those bike facilities. But in terms of being more strategic about, actively going after the gaps that exist, we haven't established a protocol yet. So that is definitely a gap that we have in the system, Pete, that you identified.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have, I'm asking, sorry, go ahead. Did someone start talking? No, okay. We're going to be asking for volunteers a couple of times in this meeting, but I think we're looking for maybe 1 or 2 people to take a look at the list and help do some prioritizing of the priorities. I don't think this has to take a long time. I don't even necessarily think it would take a meeting. I think it would just probably be some emailing with Raymond. Any takers? Pete, awesome. All right, I can do this one too. And we can do this over email. And great, so we'll plan to bring back a list for next month that we will actually vote on, and we can, of course, amend it and edit it, but I know it's often easier to have something to react to than to just sort of be starting from like all of the possibilities. So that's what we'll do. And if anyone who didn't volunteer but has some opinions and thoughts, please feel free to let us know. Go ahead, Wanwu.
Yeah, just real quick, this is as opposed to like a direct project that we're talking about. We did have a presentation from the Parks Recreation Open Area Plan at the last planning meeting. And one of the talks that we had was about connectivity and the importance thereof. So the actual porosity of routes that are available between parks. Like we have a lot of parks, but we need to make sure that people have good access to them. So trying to align kind of like the pros plan with kind of some of our prioritization in that, I think is going to be key. I'm sure we're thinking about that as well during that process. So not specific projects, but just in terms of access to parks, I think is a key element. We don't need to like necessarily expand and build more parks, because I know that they were basically saying we have plenty, but just making sure that people have a better access. And I think that that's one element that I just wanted to bring up as we look at the comprehensive plan. That's something that we'll talk about as well. So that, and then just as a point of disclosure, obviously, my employer owns properties in the State and Eisenhower area, but that I've been living on Oak Brook for 13 years and I've also been in on Way Market since 1997. So I've been in this South Side kind of area for 25 years now. And one of the thoughts that, again, like just we've had that State Street corridor plan. I think it is very important that we continue to emphasize the gateway of 94 to Ann Arbor, creating a sense of place and legibility, as well as, and we got a lot of right of way there. So introducing road diets to potentially have greater, especially Eisenhower. I mean, that's a boulevard, right? So can we rethink and re-envision that boulevard from being primarily auto-centric into road dieted areas that have great separation for bike lanes and better connectivity? So that's something that I want to continue to, again, like regardless of like, I'm obviously disclosing the fact that my employer owns property in that area. I still want to say just for the city to really take a look at that gateway, kind of think about where road diets are possible, especially in that area. A lot of auto-centric feel there, creating great separation. And, we talk a lot about utilization. A lot of people have given me feedback about the road diets on Main Street saying, oh, I don't see any bikes. Well, it wasn't done for the bikes, but it was done for sideswipe and speed limit adherences. So that's one kind of like specific area I want to continue to advocate for, just as a citizen that's lived in that area for 25 years. And then also the concept of creating more porosity and connectivity between parks, recreational areas. I think that helps even just from like cardiovascular health. So just creating more porosity in that respect. Lastly, yesterday we did hear from, it was the Duvarn and Pontiac Trail development on that landfill. A lot of the big concerns that we've been hearing about is Pontiac Trail and Duvarn's. The 484 units, it's a very ambitious development. Unfortunately, it's going to be very difficult to increase right of way in that area. So again, strengthening non-motorized kind of infrastructure in that area is going to continue to be critical. So I'm taking a look at what's possible there. I do see Duvarn on the CIP as well, knowing that, if you have big investment that's coming in for, 480 some units, then it is important for us to try and align some of that just on the north side as well as the south side. So those are kind of specific ones that I wanted to highlight. And then thematically speaking, trying to align the Parks Recreational Open Plan and connectivity of recreational paths between the park system. So B2B trail connectivity. So thanks.
Thanks. That's super helpful. I think one possible way to frame, especially the State and Eisenhower area, is thinking in terms of the TC1, the new TC1 districts, and looking at making a lot of non-motorized improvements in wherever we end up creating TC1 districts. That's my neck of the woods as well. I would love to see Eisenhower get a lot friendlier for everyone who's not a car. All right, so this is great. Any other people who have ideas and thoughts, feel free to email them to Raymond and or me, and Pete, Raymond, and I will pull together some stuff for us to react to next month and vote on. And we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda. We are moving today. This is great. Is the Vision Zero Implementation Committee. We are going to hear a report. We postponed this from last month because of how long everything was taking last month. So Raymond's going to give us a quick overview of the recent meetings of the Vision Zero Implementation Committee. And then we don't have Julie tonight, so Brett, it'll be on you to share any thoughts or insights from those meetings.
All right, so hopefully my screen is sharing. Yep, I'm getting some head nods, thank you. All right, so there have been 2 meetings that have now transpired since we last gave you an update. So I wanted to quickly run through some of the highlights of those 2 meetings. The first series of updates I'm going to give you should look and sound familiar to many of you because it's just moving along the same trajectory on these quick build projects that we've previously reported on. This meeting was held, I believe, back in May, was the actual Vision Zero Implementation Committee meeting, May 26th. So I'm going to skip over a lot of the background materials. All of this is in your packets. So, if you want to dive in deep and, ask me questions, you're welcome to. But what I wanted to do is really just jump to the areas of focus that we're working on for this summer and early fall for implementation of quick build projects. So this just kind of shows the geographic layout, and I'll just quickly step through each of those. Again, we've reported on these in the past. This is more like a status update. The one thing I'll say is, with the transition of the fiscal year, the city's fiscal year starts July 1st. That just occurred. Just on Monday night, City Council approved some purchase orders for us to be able to order some materials such as delineators and things like that. So my team just met this morning actually talking about finalizing those orders and getting the materials and we can start to put these things in the ground. So Anne is a series of, I use the term virtual bump outs, but that's probably not a good term. They're paint and post. So you'll see that what we're doing is we're kind of painting out some extensions, and it's hard to see, but there are some little dots on the perimeter of these bump outs, which indicate some vertical delineators or posts that will be installed. So the idea is to really, reduce those turning speeds of vehicles, give pedestrians some better protection. And then we're also going to implement some high visibility lane markings for cyclists that are traversing through those intersections, especially at Ann and 4th and Ann and 5th. Glen Fuller, again, this is to help reduce some of that turning speeds for vehicles coming off Glen, turning onto Fuller by creating this paint and post bump out, and then adding some conspicuity to the crosswalks to alert motorists to the possible presence of cyclists with the green demarcation, and just draw some added attention to it in general. And then also putting some high visibility markings along Fuller leading up to Glen for the bike lane as well. Liberty Stadium, again, this is largely focused on improving the visibility of the bike lanes through the intersection. So taking a sort of dashed green bike lane approach and kind of in all directions running it through at Liberty and Stadium to alert motorists to bicyclists in that area. Maple Road, a similar type of treatment, really drawing some attention to those bike lanes, putting in some green high visibility pavement markings, putting in some bike boxes, and really just letting motorists kind of understand where to expect cyclists, and conversely also help better communicate to cyclists, where they might feel the most comfortable biking in those roadways. South University and State is again a paint and post style bump out. So again, tightening up some of those turning radiuses coming off of, or radii, I guess, off of South U. And then there's some turn lanes and such that, based on the data, we think we can kind of reduce those down to add some added pedestrian spaces and make those crossing distances a little bit shorter. Packard Street from Main to State, this is filling in a missing gap of bike lane. And then also putting in some high visibility green paint where there are some conflict zones with motor vehicles. So in particular at Madison and Thompson. and then at the approaches to Division as well. Washington Street, and again, these are those paint and post style bump outs. So you just see a lot of the corners. We'll get some treatments to reduce the turning speeds of motor vehicles. So along Washington, at Ashley, at Main, and at 4th, there's a whole series of bump outs that are going to be installed. So that was the highlights from the May meeting. And then, Molly, if it's okay with you, I'll jump ahead to the last meeting we had, which was, let's see, late last month.
Yeah, I have can I ask one quick question?
Sure, of course.
You've been saying paint and post. Are there going to be posts, any sort of vertical elements? And
yes.
There will. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, we, to the point you made earlier about the maintenance equipment, we feel pretty strongly we just need to put the posts in and then we'll figure it out.
Awesome.
We are hopeful that they can stay up year round. If it becomes problematic, we'll have to figure out some other solution until the equipment can be procured. But it is something we're working on in tandem, and we just feel like we need to bite the bullet and get them in. So that's where we're headed with it.
Thank you. All right.
I see Erica.
Oh, sorry. Yep. Let's keep doing questions now. Go ahead, Erica.
Thanks. And I just have with the paint and post bump outs, obviously those are intended to, I think, improve the pedestrian safety. I assume that this is sort of similar to what happened at Pontiac Trail and Barton Drive. Am I picturing that correctly? Okay.
It is, yeah.
And I've mentioned this before, and I'm sure it's not a standard size bike lane. I'm sure there's many reasons why we wouldn't, we don't want to advertise it as a bike lane. And yet, in that situation, it would have, I always thought it would be nice to be able to creep in there more easily as a cyclist and take advantage of a little extra protection at an intersection for those who want to. I think it's pretty clear to cyclists that it's not really intended to be a bike lane. So there might be situations where that's not advisable for some safety reason, but I guess I would hope that if that opening at the very end could just be designed so that if somebody wants to get in there, it's relatively easy for a cyclist to be able to creep in at these intersections.
Yeah, and Eric,
or maybe you want to give me feedback about why that's not a good idea.
No, actually, we are looking to do different material types. So the location that you're referring to up there on Pontiac Trail uses what we call quick curb. Quick curb is the same material that's used for the in-road pedestrian crosswalk signs, or the R1-6 signs. And it's called quick curb because it's almost like the little standing curb that then has the paddle on it. For all of these paint and post projects, we're actually going to use delineators, very similar to the ones that you see on Depot at 5th. So these are smaller. They don't have that big wide base. Now we are going to use quick curbs for other applications because we're doing some hardened centerline applications. And so that's where we do want that sort of like curb style treatment. But for all of these bump outs and things like that, if I'm not mistaken, they're all going to be what we call treetop delineators. So they're a small base. They only have like a, about this big around, and the plastic post that sticks up from there. So the ability for, bicycles or others to kind of weave in there, especially like if you're trying to get up onto the sidewalk ramp, I think it would be pretty seamless as I'm envisioning it and as I understand how the design is being laid out.
Great, thanks so much.
Yep.
Great. Let's see. I'm not seeing other hands, so I think now you can go ahead to the next section, Raymond. Thank you.
All right. Then the other thing that I think we've mentioned this to you before in our monthly staff reports, but the Michigan Fitness Foundation had received a grant to implement a pedestrian safety campaign. And this is they're using a very similar approach to what they did in Grand Rapids a couple years ago. If you're familiar with the Driving Change campaign, which was a campaign specifically focused on improving awareness and safety and interactions between cyclists and motorists. So they're doing something similar, but with pedestrians, and they chose 3 communities across the state. We are lucky enough to be one of those, but unfortunate enough to be one of those because that means we had crashes that necessitated such a campaign. So the good news is it's an interesting team. Tool Design Group is leading it, but they're also partnered up with the Good marketing firm, which has a lot of know-how on how to target certain populations and get messages across. So this is just kicking off, but we're using the Vision Zero Implementation Committee to help as a steering committee for this initiative because it overlaps so nicely with the Vision Zero Implementation Committee's approach. So there's where the team is working right now is they are combing through the data and analyzing that data. So there are 40 slides included in your packet. I'm just going to focus in on the key takeaways because I think it's probably the most apropos to just, for the amount of time we have, just to show you where their head is at, what the data is telling them, which will guide how they're going to tailor the, messaging, the marketing, the populations to reach out to and tailor those messages to those populations. So looking at the data, the key takeaways here are that pedestrians aged between 29 and 50 and 59 are overrepresented, particularly 50 to 45 statewide. Drivers aged between 20 and 44 years are overrepresented statewide. Then areas with a higher share of non-English speaking community members have a higher frequency of crashes as well. I'm going to scroll ahead to the next area. There it is, key takeaways. So in terms of where crashes are happening, pedestrian crashes are more likely to happen near land uses that attract or generate pedestrians, on our high-speed arterial roads and at intersections. In terms of when pedestrian crashes are happening, they tend to happen on weekdays, especially during the AM and PM, what we call peak or commute periods. Many of them happen in dark conditions, and then many happen during times of year when school is in session. And then in terms of why crashes are happening, the data is showing the team that driver failure to yield is the most reported contributing factor. Left turn crashes and straight are most frequent, and most crashes involve a pedestrian crossing the street. So these are, I think that's those are the key takeaways. And again, what they're doing is they're using this data to help inform who the target populations will be, how to target those messages. And we've been, through the meeting, there was some discussion about some other data sources to look at. I'm sure when you see some of these key takeaways, some of them may not surprise you because, some of it may just be what you might expect, or we've been reporting on crashes to you for a couple of years now through our annual crash report. And this tracks pretty closely with what our findings have been as well. So it's always good to hear that, the methodologies used by 2 different groups are arriving at the same conclusions. So, so those are the key takeaways I wanted to highlight. I'm happy to entertain any questions. And then, as we said earlier, if Brett has anything he wishes to add in terms of his impressions or the direction these things are going, I'm happy to hear from him as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Raymond. Is it all right with folks if Raymond unshares? Yeah, perfect. Okay. Any questions about either of the things that Raymond presented? I have one. So this education, it's an education campaign. So are we talking about educating drivers or pedestrians? This is my question.
I think it could be both. The idea is really to, what are those underlying causes of the crashes? And what are the ways that we can effectively communicate messaging to whichever population is, most at risk and contributing to that. So again, I think the team is really trying to focus in on what that data is telling them.
Okay. I just, if the main cause is driver failure to yield, it feels like that I don't want us to be like putting time into educating pedestrians. I had another question, which was if the city has plans to use the data coming out of this work for other, like the other E's, I guess, like we're focusing on education for this project because I guess people came to us for it. But in terms of engineering, like other pieces of our city planning, will we be able to make other uses of what these findings are telling us, or is it just sort of self-contained?
No, I think it can definitely inform. One of the things, our team has put together both the walk-friendly and bike-friendly community applications, and it does do this sort of 6E approach. And, we kind of go through fits and starts when it comes to education. Sometimes a couple years ago, when I first started back in 2018, we were wrapping up this changing driver behavior study. And then before that, there were the Be Safe campaigns and others. So I think the idea here is if we kind of crack the code, and the one thing that's interesting about this study, especially if it follows the changing or driving change out of Grand Rapids, they will analyze the effectiveness of these campaigns. It's not just here's some social media content you're going to put out and then walk away. They're really going to see, are they reaching the audiences, and is it leading to discernible impacts on safety? So I'm hopeful that will follow the same trajectory. And then the idea is if it's very successful, it should be incumbent upon us to figure out a way to continue it, because, education is part of, that 6E approach or 5E approach. And making sure that we can come up with a campaign that is replicable and can be sustainable is definitely something top of mind for us.
Thanks. Erica?
Yeah, I wonder on the education side of things, if there's an opportunity, I just don't know how much, what our resources look like on this, but to be experimenting with different styles of communication in terms, or just tones, I should say tones of communication, like humor versus, a more traditional government approach to, like very bright colors, sort of thing. Because I know when I was looking at these many years ago, at least some of the ones that were more entertaining, I would think might grab people's attention more. And for different demographic groups, I don't know, it would be nice to spend a little time with some humor if possible. Also, I've done just on the pedestrian, communicating to pedestrians. I don't know to the degree that our data demonstrates that we have a distracted walking problem. I know that when I was doing observations, crosswalk observations along Plymouth Road, I certainly observed what appeared to be a lot of distracted walking. And I wonder if there's a way to be trying to grab pedestrians' attention a little bit to get them to put their phones down while they're crossing a little bit. But I agree with Molly's assessment that the bulk of our work should be around focusing on motorist behavior and answering. I know, especially with that older demographic, I hear the questions that some of my mom's friends ask her, because they know that I'm pretty interested in this sort of stuff. And I think really understanding what some of people's concerns are with some of the new facilities that we're putting into place and helping to explain it. And targeting to different audience groups would be helpful.
Thanks. Brett, did you have anything you wanted to share about your thoughts on the experience so far?
Raymond did a great job, as always, summarizing everything. The Vision Zero Implementation Committee meeting from May, I don't think you mentioned, I wanted to give you guys credit for talking about the new speed management program, and that your team is developing a toolkit of strategies to address speed on arterials, and work on categorizing all the streets in the city and pairing with tools. And then also, as far as the Michigan Fitness Foundation, I think we covered all of the key takeaways. We went through all those, but some of the numbers are, I think interesting that the driver failure to yield is the primary cause. That number is 62%, if anyone's interested. 14% of pedestrian crashes were hit and run. That's a a number. I think that was a little bit bigger. And it's, probably higher because, the feeling is that there are a lot of unreported pedestrian crashes. So that's something to keep in mind. And also we talked a little bit about driver distraction. That's something that's very, very rarely, ascertained and reported. And as far as the pedestrian crashes resulting from left turns, drivers making left turns, I think that number is 43%, and about 41% were drivers going straight. So, but overall, I think Raymond summed everything up really well. And we have another meeting with that group, and I think in just a few weeks in August. And these are all open to the public, of course, so anyone can join.
Great, thank you. And do we know sort of what's next for Vision Zero implementation?
Yeah, great question. So the first is, as I mentioned earlier, we are hoping to start getting some stuff in the ground for these quick builds for this first round. Then the Sam Schwartz team is also going to help us identify a next round, which will feed into the ARPA funding that was awarded by council to this initiative that I forgot someone mentioned earlier in the meeting. Then the other thing, and I'm glad Brett brought it up, the thing we're really going to start focusing on is the speed management study and process. This is what we previously called the major streets traffic calming. The reason why we are kind of rebranding it a little bit towards speed management is because we feel like that's really what it's all about, is speed management. And some people have an aversion to the word traffic calming, so we're just trying to strike a tone that maybe resonates with folks. And some of the preliminary work, so I do caution you that this is subject to change, but the consultant team is looking at maybe establishing typologies like contexts. So not just necessarily looking at the functional classification of the roadways, arterial versus collector versus whatever, but what's happening along that roadway, more so than just whether it's an arterial. So, for example, when you look at 7th Street, that arterial looks and feels much different than Washtenaw, right? But they're both arterials, they're both primary arterials, but one has driveways and residences that back up against it, the other has shopping malls and what have you. So the consultant team really thinks that approaching it from a sort of typology will be helpful in making sure that we do a context-sensitive approach, which is really mindful of what's happening on the adjacent land uses as well as along with the transportation itself. So there's going to be a lot more information coming up on that and opportunities to engage, and we'll make sure we share that with the commission.
Thanks, Brett, and then Pete.
Yeah, one more thing I wanted to emphasize from the Michigan Fitness Foundation meeting is that they did find, and it might seem obvious, but they did confirm that streets with higher speed limits had also higher crashes per mile. Although they may not have had a higher raw number crashes per mile driven on those roads with higher speed limits was higher. So those two things went together. Just wanted to mention that.
That's really useful. Thank you. Pete.
I guess I would like to say, as far as major streets traffic calming goes, that I'd like to not lose sight of the other aggressive behaviors that enable speeding. So like passing and improper lane usage. I guess you can maybe lump that together with speeding as it is an enabler for speeding, but just would like to make sure that we're looking at that as well.
Thanks. I'm not seeing other hands. This is actually a pretty good segue into the next agenda item, but I'm just going to give a moment in case there's any other questions or thoughts about this. Okay, so the next agenda item is the formation of a traffic calming committee. So one thing I can clarify right up front, we just talked about speed management for major streets. The idea for this committee would be focusing on the neighborhoods. So a little background, we've heard from staff that there's a significant backlog of petitions in the neighborhood traffic calming program queue. So it's multiple years now. Even if you successfully get through the petitioning process, we're talking about a multi-year wait for assessment and treatment. And I think there's a lot of concerns about this. And so I'm realizing now that Raymond has put my like verbatim email into my little script here, but remembering Linda Diane Felt, our former chair, one of her big pieces of advice was that the real work of commissions happens in committees. And that's where people can sort of roll up their sleeves and work with staff on solutions. And knowing that this the neighborhood traffic calming thing I think, Raymond, you like to say we're a victim of our own success. The demand is very high. The process was made easier a few years ago. And the result is that the wait gets longer and longer. City Council recently, I think, doubled the budget, but it is still a relatively small number. And we still can't actually get that much done in any given year. And so it occurred to me that this was something that the commission could do in a committee to really work on, even though the city sort of revised the process a few years ago. Maybe we need to look at it again, because a process that is creating these very long backlogs is not working as intended. And so I wanted to sort of put this out to the committee if this is something folks would be interested in working on, if there are any volunteers to serve on a traffic calming committee. And Raymond, I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about some of the additional context in terms of this plan for this coming year. But I think, yeah, we still probably need the committee.
Yeah, and Molly, I think you framed the issue very well. Just to give you a sense of where we're at. So, one of the criticisms of the previous traffic calming program was it was too difficult to get approval of a petition. And so what we did is we changed kind of the dynamic where we put a higher threshold for a neighborhood to qualify by the number of signatures that are required on the front end. The idea being that the neighborhood should be aware that this is coming, and the more signatures you get, the higher points you get, which then, gets you in the queue. But in terms of getting a project approved, the thresholds are actually a little bit lower now. Because, again, for those that participate in the process, they can help guide the outcome of the project. But what we found is, as Molly said, there are a lot of neighborhoods. There's been this pent up demand. So we have 15 petitions currently in queue. Our goal is to process 3 per year. Because that's what the budget would support, both in terms of process as well as implementation. There are several things that have happened over the last couple of years where we haven't even been able to do 3 per year because the capital cost to install some of these larger traffic calming projects, such as raised intersections and things like that, have chewed up so much budget that they eat into the next fiscal year. So we actually mortgage kind of the next fiscal year for the previous fiscal year's traffic calming. So, for example, this past year we were only able to do North Side and Longman Fairview before we ran out of funding. So council did double our budget. We were typically running $130,000 per year. We're up to $260,000. With that money, we are actually in negotiations right now with a consultant to help us get caught up on the backlog of petitions. But that won't solve necessarily the capital costs that go with it. If I can process all 15 and get caught up, then I might have a multi-million-dollar ask to council to implement the construction. Maybe it's not that much, but it could be quite a bit. So there is this issue where we know there's demand. There's limited capacity, both in terms of staff and in terms of budget, what we're able to accomplish. And I think staff acknowledges that there's some opportunities for improvement, both in terms of process, both in terms of, the outcomes. And we would welcome very much working with the Transportation Commission. We already have some ideas. We've been doing some research on it for a while. We'd love to share those with some commission members to help bounce some ideas off of you, see what you think. And then the idea is, based on what we just discussed, the major streets traffic calming program, or the speed management program. In theory, that would go to council for approval so that it's on their radar. What we can do in tandem is bring an update to the neighborhood traffic calming program as well. So then that way we have one coordinated, holistic program that can address both major streets and neighborhood streets. So I think the timing is again perfect. I think, launching something now will give us several months, upwards of a year, to kind of think through this, and, come to some consensus in terms of what's a good approach, one that we think will work for both the neighborhoods, that will work for the city and the resources available to us, and, come up with a product that can be then incorporated into, or, be attached to the major streets initiative as well.
Thanks for that. Thoughts, questions, or volunteers? And I'm going to invite the new people, no pressure, but you've been on the commission long enough, even those of you who just got here, to volunteer for a committee if you are interested and want to do the work. And I will already say that I'm going to be doing it. Because I can't stop thinking about this stuff. But I'd love some buddies.
I'm interested in this, but I would encourage others to get involved as well. I think it's so critical. The one thing, obviously, we have a process, neighborhood traffic calming program and process. The one thing that I guess I would hope that we might be able to also discuss within the context of this conversation is, are there changes that we might also be able to make to our street resurfacing program, so that as we move across the city in areas where, and I don't know, we may not have the data on this, but I certainly know when I'm out knocking doors across the ward now, and there's street resurfacing projects coming up, people say, oh, is traffic, why isn't traffic calming happening as part of this, and obviously there are costs associated with that and planning, and there's just a whole lot else associated with it. But it feels like at this point, we kind of trust that staff has a good sense of, here are a couple things we could probably do along this corridor that might just improve things a little bit. Maybe it's not the holistic approach, but anyway, just see that perhaps we could talk about that as well.
That was on my mind too. And in terms of what serving on a committee looks like, it's not usually it's not super onerous. We're looking at like maximum one meeting a month, probably at some point during the workday, although we can be flexible if needed, depending on people's schedules. They'll be via Zoom, and they will be open to the public, similar to the Vision Zero committee. So we'll probably make some kind of announcement as well to open this up to members of the public as well to participate in this work.
And Molly, if I may throw out another suggestion, I should have probably asked you beforehand, but when we last did the traffic calm, we had a traffic calming subcommittee that helped influence the program that we have today. We did also accept, non-transportation commission members. So the reason why I say that is if you know someone who's particularly passionate about this, and Molly, if you feel like it's a good idea, feel free to have them reach out to us as well. We can, again, hopefully Molly, I didn't back you in a corner on that one, but
that's what I figured we would do. That's how it worked on the micromobility committee that I
right, exactly.
So, yeah, that sounds great. Brian, go ahead.
I was just going to volunteer to participate.
Awesome, great.
And then Molly, if I may, Molly and I were talking about this right before the meeting. We do like to set like a charter whenever we have an official committee. So maybe what we can do is I can circulate the charter that was used in the last subcommittee, and we can, the volunteers can kind of see if there's anything to be changed or added or replaced there, and then we can bring that back for approval by the commission at the next meeting. And then if others have had a change of heart and want to volunteer, that would be a good opportunity to refocus at that time as well.
Yeah, sounds great. All right, well, I won't make us sit in uncomfortable silence any longer. We will move forward with me and Brian working with Raymond on the charter, and then bring the charter back next month for a vote. And maybe other folks can think about whether they might want to work on this with us as well, and we can start getting the word out to the public. And then that's the like big body of the thing. So we're moving on now to the staff report and updates.
Very good. Thank you, Molly. As is always the case, included in your packet is a monthly progress report of transportation projects that are currently underway, either in terms of construction, planning, or other. So, Pete, for your benefit, typically what we do now is we just go through and just highlight the changes from month to month. So I kind of do it rapid fire. I might take a little bit more time today just because we're a little ahead of schedule for a change. So I can do that. The first set of projects you see is under the construction header. A lot of these changes really are just schedule changes, just because projects either slip or have started to actually get implemented. So we try to give them updates on that. So the annual street resurfacing project, there's just a timeline update that says that the work is scheduled to continue through October. Scioto Church Road, which I know is important to Pete. There's talk that has been moved to the summer of 2022, but I think that's actually, is that 2023, Nick? Construction on Scioto?
Yeah, that isn't the change that was made. That already said 22.
Okay.
We are looking at, obviously it's the middle of summer 2022. We've had challenges at the state level with getting everything through MDOT, as this is a federal aid project. Probably what's going to happen at this point is that some of the ancillary work will be done this fall, and then the actual repaving will happen in the spring of 23. So we're still working out the details of how that's going to be split up.
Thanks for the lifeline on that, Nick.
Yep.
Sidewalk Gaps, a lot of changes to schedule and whether they're complete. So the first one that has an update is Broadway from Broadview to Plymouth has been postponed to 2023. Ellsworth from State to Stone School is scheduled for fall of 2022. Hutchins and Prescott near Stadium is now complete. South Main Street, just in front of a single parcel, is postponed due to some easement needs. Newport from Sunset to Downup will begin late July or early August, so any day now. Nixon Traver from Westbury to Logan Elementary will begin later this month, so again, any day now. Platte Road in front of a single parcel at 2231 is now complete. Saunders Crescent, again in front of a single parcel, is now complete. Winchell, Brockman, and the Freeze Loop is in progress. And that is the sidewalk changes from last month to this month. Platte Road has some updates. The project has been postponed to spring of 2023. This is largely due to supply chain issues because water main pipe is hard to come by these days. And then the other thing that has changed from last meeting to this is that when City Council approved the contract, there was a stipulation added that an all ages and abilities bicycle route be installed along the segment of Platte Road. So we're currently in the process of evaluating a 4 to 3 lane conversion and looking at what other aspects of the project we can bring forward. We will have to go out for public comment on that, but the good news about the postponement is that gives us ample time to be able to do all that, to do the analysis, go out to get public feedback on it before that final design is settled upon.
And can I interrupt you right now, Raymond? I'm sorry.
Sure.
I know, and it's a little inappropriate to interrupt on this, but I do think this might be an appropriate time for me to at least acknowledge that I was wrong in a more public setting. So I've acknowledged this to you. I just want to, I know that folks around the screen may have been paying attention a little more to the conversation around plat. And certainly the resolution that got crafted around that talked about this being an all ages and ability route in our transportation plan. I want to make it clear that it is not a part, an all ages and ability route in our transportation plan. That is due to somebody being unable to read maps particularly well, and probably needing to scroll in just a little closer the next time I make proclamations at the council table. So I am glad that we're pursuing this and recognize that there's additional analysis that needs to be done. But I think that there are a lot of folks in the community that are excited that we are, at least that we're looking at improvements along plat of this nature.
Okay. Thanks, Eric. All right, Earhart Road, really just a change to the schedule. Construction is currently anticipated to occur in fall of 2022 as part of the annual street resurfacing program. Broadway Street from Plymouth to Plymouth, design work on the project is currently being completed, but construction will be postponed to spring of 2023. Huron Parkway to begin resurfacing, we just updated the description to include the installation of bike lanes because that is part of the project. We wanted to, I don't think we formally disclosed that. So, and that one is scheduled for August of 2022. Getty's Avenue resurfacing is scheduled for September of 2022 for construction. The Huron Parkway Bridge Capital Preventive Maintenance Repairs Project is underway. And is expected to be complete in late August. Miller Catherine, construction is anticipated to begin later this month. So again, any day now. This is for the two-way protected cycle track, which will complete kind of the downtown loop. Moving on to design and planning. Barton Drive bike lanes. The big news here, which is actually outdated in your plan, but my understanding is council did pass the resolution on Monday night, which approved removal of parking in favor of bike lanes. So the report alludes to the fact that that decision was forthcoming, but had not been made yet. But now we have direction from council on that. 7th Street and Greenview, there's public engagement scheduled for August. We'll make sure that as soon as that hits the airwaves to share that with you. That one's been pushed back a couple times, so we're hopeful that August is for realsies this time. But again, we'll be sure to share it with you when it hits the airwaves. Brook Street improvement, water main, stormwater, street resurfacing, sidewalk gaps, design is currently underway. And construction is planned for 2023. And then other updates and information, you got an update from you got a presentation regarding the curbside management study, so I didn't do anything there. Streetlight, DTE's addressed 587 outages, and a new streetlight was put in at Kingsley and First. Related to the transportation plan update, you got the update from the last two meetings, and I think Brett had mentioned that the next meeting is going to be held on Tuesday, August 16th at 5 p.m. Those are open to the public, so if anybody wants to follow along, you're able to do that. We also are trying to beef up our game when it comes to education and encouragement. So we do have, I think I reported on this in the past, we have some badges in the summer game, the Ann Arbor Public Library District Library Summer Game. So we have, I think, upwards of 900 badges that have been awarded. I just got an update today from Suzanne Flowers, our new transportation planner, and we're pretty excited because these are educational opportunities and it's a way to expose people to the biking and walking infrastructure around downtown. So it's exciting stuff. And then the other thing that Suzanne is working on is a group ride and learn on August 18th, which will be a day after our next transportation commission meeting. Now, unfortunately, I think Brian, that conflicts with the AAA board meeting. There's a little bit of a conflict there, but that's going to begin at 6 p.m. There'll be games, snacks, and other things. We'll start at the Argo Park Pavilion and end at Hanover Square Park. If I'm not mistaken, Hanover Square is right there at Packard and Vision, if I remember correctly. That's where that is. And this is jointly sponsored by the Michigan chapter of the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals, as well as the city of Ann Arbor. So that's exciting stuff. And then Brian was kind enough to provide some updates as well, which I'll just read off, but he's probably more appropriate to actually speak to if anyone has any questions. So the ride continues to restore service, and full service is expected by the end of this month, except for routes 62 and 68, which will begin in August and September, respectively. The long-range strategic plan is going to the board tomorrow. So if you've been following that initiative, you might want to tune in to see what the board of directors does with the long-range plan. And then lastly, the ride is offering the football ride again for fall home University of Michigan football games. And that concludes my report, and I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Great, thank you. Will we get details about that ride and learn event by email?
Yeah, definitely. When this report went out, I was trying to see if there was any information available posted online yet, so I could hyperlink to it, and there wasn't. But I'm hopeful as soon as that there is, I'll be sure to share that with you as well.
Awesome. I'm wondering now, we talk about agenda items later, but I wonder if it might make sense to have Suzanne Flowers come and talk to us at some point about like what she's doing, what her job is.
Yeah, that'd be great. We've been looking for a good opportunity to do that. Okay. So I think there are some good opportunities coming up here too long.
Great. Other questions?
Oh, and actually, if I could make one other announcement, for those of you who knew and worked with Eli Cooper over the years, he has officially retired, took effect at the beginning of this month. We actually had a retirement party for him just last Friday, wished him well. We're very, very thankful for his contributions to the city over the 17 plus years he was with the city. So I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge those contributions. I mean, he was the only game in town for a while at the city side for really promoting bicycle and pedestrian activities and really kind of, leading the charge to make sure that, designs of projects really incorporated as many bike ped facilities as possible. He was the keeper of the non-motorized plan and was, just a warrior when it came, as Nick can attest. He'd show up with that plan and pull out the map and point to lines and say, why aren't we doing this, when we should be? So it is a loss to the city that he has retired. We wish him well, but there's also an opportunity. We are posting his vacancy. It's actually out right now. It's posted to NACTO. It's posted to American Planning, NACTO is the National Association of City Transportation Officials, the American Planning Association, the Michigan Planning Association. So if you know of any possible candidates that are looking to work with an awesome team on very cool projects, refer them to that job posting, because we are looking for another stellar addition to the team. So just wanted to, not on the written report, but I wanted to make that announcement.
Awesome, thank you. All right, well, if there are no questions, we can move on to, we can move on to liaison reports. So this is for any commissioners who serve as a liaison to another body or organization are invited to provide brief reports and updates. And Erica, I believe you had one. Do you want to share this? Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, and admittedly, I didn't prep Erica for this one, so my apologies. But,
I'm thinking of some things, but I didn't know that you thought I had to say.
What I had put in there, Erica, was the action on Monday night related to the coordination, directing sustainable and transportation policies. We referred to the Environmental Commission resolution that passed.
Yeah, thank you. I had forgotten about that. Yes. So there was a resolution that passed on Monday night that was sponsored by Council Member Griswold, and it is to increase coordination and communication between transportation, energy, environmental, and the Commission on Disabilities was also included, and the resolution shifted a little bit, but the final one is essentially focusing in on sidewalks maintenance and operations, I believe. Basically sidewalks. I think there's an actually even narrower focus than that in terms of kind of a starter conversation, place of starting the conversation, if I understand from Councilmember Griswold, really focusing in on kind of a challenging, something that's been debated around native plants and kind of chapter 40. And so anyway, this is, I'm sure there'll be an official invitation that goes out at some point when there's a meeting. All the commissions are invited. It's not anticipated to be a joint meeting of everybody in all 4 commissions, but this is a one-time meeting, as my understanding, to kind of focus our thoughts and energies collectively around a couple of issues that have been identified. I wouldn't be surprised if trees and sidewalks, kind of wrestling between that issue, might come up in that conversation a little bit as well. And even maybe sidewalk gap prioritization, I can imagine coming up as an issue. So I certainly encourage a few Transportation Commission members, if you're interested in this, to come and bring your thoughts and insight to that meeting. So there's that. Thank you. I would have completely forgotten. I want to keep note for myself of what happens at, you mentioned Barton, so that happened. And I'm trying to think of things that I'm anticipating bringing to Transportation Commission next month would be a resolution to, Molly and I have been discussing this and discussed with Raymond, a no right turn on red in the downtown. So I'd like that to be considered. Obviously, we need to consider the rides sort of movements around downtown as well, and make sure that that is appropriately integrated into any sort of policy recommendation on that. So there's that. And then there's also probably an early fall a resolution that I'd like to bring forward about not requiring City Council to approve changes in when a road project involves the removal of parking, that wouldn't be necessarily something that requires council approval. So a couple of things on the horizon.
Awesome. Great to see those coming. Thank you. Other liaison reports. Yeah, one move.
Just to actually add on that, I think council had the first reading of the removal of the parking minimums. I don't want to steal your thunder. That's kind of a big
Thank you. That was a big one.
Problem.
I really need to keep notes for myself.
You're good. You're good.
Yeah. Report on that one.
Yeah. And then the only thing that I kind of, I'll turn it back to you in just a second. The only other thing, we postponed the votes on the rezoning and the approval of site plan for that village that I mentioned earlier. That's coming back to Planning Commission on September 7th. So if anybody's concerned about traffic load or the strengthening of non-motorized infrastructure on Duvarn and Pontiac Trail, September 7th is when that's coming back. So I would say that's probably the only one. I'm going to turn it right back to you, Erica.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for mentioning the parking minimums. That's huge. It's a huge step forward for our city. And that was first reading, but I'm glad it didn't seem to receive anticipate that there's seems to be pretty strong support for this moving forward. The one thing I also forgot to mention in my update, I just came out of Airport Advisory Commission. I'll send this around as an invitation, but there is a airport picnic that I think is maybe on August 17th or 18th. I can't quite remember, but that's a good time to go out and see our one of our huge transportation facilities in the community and get a little better sense of that as well.
Great, thank you both. Other liaison reports. Brian?
I would normally have something to say, but I put it in the report that Raymond put out. So,
okay.
But I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great to see that we're getting close to full service.
Yes, I'm very excited.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Vote yes on transit, August 2nd.
Or are we allowed to say that?
I think I am, maybe, but I don't know.
There's a millage on the ballot. You can educate yourself about it and all the things that we might get from that millage. Other liaison reports. Okay, moving on to commission member communication. So this is an opportunity for all commissioners to provide reports and updates. Okay, next up is call for agenda items. So as a reminder, if you have suggestions for the agenda, this is not a chance to like dive all the way into them. Just like quick, let us know what it is. We can get into it in more detail over email or a phone call if needed. Raymond can give us some highlights of what is coming down the pike.
Yeah, so the next Vision Zero implementation plan committee meeting is August 16th, which will be the day before your next meeting. So we you know, I might be able to turn around some information depending upon when that information posts. I can maybe include the PowerPoint. So that's one thing. Erica mentioned the no turn on red downtown. You know, that might be something we're planning. The new crash data just posted not too long ago for calendar year 2021. So our GIS folks are working with our engineers on, you know, synthesizing that data. We are looking to do something a little different than the past kind of static PDF reports that we've done in the past. We're trying to see if we can do something a little bit more dynamic. I don't know what that looks like yet, because that's why we're getting our GIS folks. You know, for those of you who've seen some of our snazzy dashboards, the idea is, you know, can we make it a little bit more interactive? So stay tuned. What I suspect is I might have a small update to give you on the crash report at the next meeting, but maybe not the full dashboard or report or what have you. The Platte Road reconfiguration, depending upon how far along we are with our analysis and or public engagement, you might get an update on that. One of the things that Molly and I have talked about is looking again. I know we just processed a Transportation Commission bylaws. We actually processed it twice, or you all did, because of legal review kind of technical requirement we had to do. But one of the things that Molly has suggested, which I think is maybe good for this committee or commission to consider, is removal of the transportation business operator position. So, you know, Jim Summers was representing that, but it's hard to find commission members. Molly's been kind of hitting the streets trying to find a transportation business owner to fill that space, and there aren't a lot.
Yeah, I've been trying to recruit, and they're all doing so well that they do not have time for us. So good news and bad news.
So this might be relatively straightforward, but as a reminder, it would take 2 readings per the bylaws, and then I think it would also require an ordinance revision. And, you know, I'll work with Molly to see, you know, what that should, I don't think, well, Molly and I will have to have a sidebar instead of me just talking out loud, but, you know, maybe keeping the same number of commissioners, but just changing that tag on that position that it may not have to be affiliated with a business.
That's how I've been thinking about it, is to just open it up as another at-large seat.
Perfect. Yeah.
I think the number of commissioners is great. It wouldn't preclude having a transportation business owner or operator on the commission, but that way it wouldn't require it, and we wouldn't be sitting around with an empty seat on the commission for months on end, because it really helps when we've got a full team.
And we've always struggled to fill this particular seat. You know, we're thankful for, you know, the years that Jim served. He did a great job, but like Molly said, he's, you know, he's just too busy, which is a good thing, but a bad thing for us. So
my understanding of the seat is that it's a little bit of a carryover from when, I don't know how many people know this history, the Transportation Commission is a descendant of the taxi board. And so back when this was the taxi board, it made, I think, a lot more sense to make sure there was a business owner on the commission, but I think it makes less sense now.
Yep. And those are the things that we're tracking for next month. And, you know, again, more stuff always pops up or things shift, but those are the things that we're looking at.
Awesome. Any other agenda items that folks want to add to the list for next month or a future month? All right. Our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, August 17th at 7 p.m. It will be another virtual meeting. And if there are no objections, we will adjourn tonight's meeting. All right, meeting is adjourned. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.